Welcome everyone to The Whole Itself Remains. I'm your host, Todd Caldecott, and you're listening to CJMP Co-op Radio 90.1 FM, broadcasting from the Cathet region on the beautiful Sunshine Coast of British Columbia, on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. And this show is also available on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. So whereas last season I spent a fair amount of time introducing the theory of holism and exploring its practical applications, this season I'm taking the next step, following a structure with each episode beginning with a short recap of current health news, followed by either a deep dive into a holistic theme or a conversation with a guest. My aim is to create a space for practitioners, thinkers, and changemakers to share their perspectives on health and healing through the lens of holism. And while the show sometimes ranges into adjacent areas, into relationships, agriculture, ecology, and community, the primary focus is on health, wellness, and the prevention of disease. For today's show, I'm going to explore the therapeutic uses of lithium, which despite its notoriety as a psychiatric drug, may have some benefits when used as a supplement for brain health. And then later, my conversation with noted American herbalist Kat Maier, author of the book Energetic Herbalism, to get her perspectives on the theory and practice of holism. So I posted to my social media earlier this year a study published in the journal Nature entitled Lithium Deficiency and the Onset of Alzheimer's Disease. And it got me really excited, even though it was a mouse model study, because it supported many of my views on the importance of lithium. In particular, lithium orotate, something that I've been using in my practice for the last decade or so, because of its seemingly important role in supporting brain health, maybe even preventing problems such as dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So let's talk a little bit about this and also contrast it with the psychiatric drug lithium carbonate. So first off, what is lithium carbonate? This is a prescription drug that is used in the treatment of acute mania and bipolar disorder. It's used in really high doses, and it's really important to monitor the patient's serum lithium levels because you have to target their serum lithium levels within a very narrow range. Typical dosage ranges somewhere between 900 to 1800 milligrams per day for an acute episode of mania or psychosis, although for a maintenance dosage it will typically be lower, somewhere between 3 to 1200 milligrams per day. In contrast, lithium orotate is a low dose, we could even say microdose form of lithium that is used in complementary and alternative medicine based on the emerging evidence that suggests trace amounts of lithium may be essential for brain health and also longevity. So first off, what is lithium? It's a chemical element with the symbol Li and the atomic number 3. That means it's third in the periodic table after hydrogen and helium. It's a soft silver-white alkali metal. It's soft enough to be cut with a knife. It's highly reactive and flammable. It never occurs freely in nature, only found in certain minerals such as the pegmatites, petalite, hectorite, etc., or found as an ion, found in ocean water, brine pools, and in certain clays. It's believed to have been generated during the Big Bang nucleosynthesis. So all the lithium that's on the earth, that's in our bodies, comes from this time during the Big Bang billions upon billions of years ago. So it's kind of amazing if you think about it. Now, in the ocean, lithium exists at a relatively constant concentration, somewhere between 0.14 to 0.25 parts per million, whereas in the Earth's crust, it has a higher abundance, somewhere between 20 to 70 parts per million. Now, lithium isn't officially recognized as an essential nutrient, but there's growing evidence that it might be. Even tiny amounts of lithium in drinking water have been linked to better mood and lower suicide rates in multiple population studies. In fact, regions where naturally higher lithium levels in the water are found tend to have fewer cases of depression and suicide. In people who don't take medication, normal lithium levels in the blood are extremely low, just a few millionths of a mole per liter, depending on local water and soil content. But in contrast, when lithium is prescribed as lithium carbonate for bipolar disorder, blood levels are kept much higher, somewhere between 0.5 to 1.3 millimoles per liter, a range that requires careful monitoring to avoid toxicity. So while trace lithium seems to quietly support emotional and neurological balance, high-dose lithium acts more like a powerful psychiatric drug, and the difference between the two is enormous. Now, lithium carbonate crosses the blood-brain barrier poorly, with only about 1 to 2% of total systemic lithium entering the central nervous system at a time. So in order to achieve these central mood stabilizing effects, high serum levels must be maintained. But this raises peripheral tissue exposure, particularly in the kidneys and the thyroid, and this produces many of lithium's very serious side effects. In contrast, lithium orotate appears to cross the blood-brain barrier much more efficiently. And this is evidenced by animal studies in the 1970s that reported higher brain lithium levels and slower clearance of lithium orotate compared to lithium carbonate, and more recent research appears to validate this. So let's talk about the relative potency and bioavailability of lithium carbonate versus orotate in the central nervous system. So here's a really interesting difference. Lithium carbonate, the prescription form used in psychiatric medicine, is about 5 to 6 times richer in lithium than lithium orotate by weight. So if you have a gram of lithium carbonate, you have roughly 188 milligrams of actual lithium, whereas a gram of lithium orotate only gives you about 35 milligrams. But here's the twist. More isn't always better. Even though lithium carbonate contains more lithium, it doesn't all make it into the brain. Lithium orotate seems to cross the blood-brain barrier much more efficiently, possibly because of the orotate molecule that carries it. And that's why tiny doses of lithium orotate, in the range of 1 to 20 milligrams per day, can sometimes produce gentle mood and cognitive benefits without raising serum levels, or, more importantly, causing side effects. So it's essentially microdosing lithium for brain health, not medicating with it. Let's talk about the mechanisms of action here. So lithium does a few important things inside the brain that helps keep mood, sleep, and thinking balanced. Number 1, it resets the body's internal clock. Lithium slows down an enzyme called GSK3 beta, which is part of the timing system that runs our daily rhythm. By blocking this enzyme, lithium helps restore normal sleep-wake cycles and supports the growth and repair of brain cells. Number 2, it quiets overstimulated nerve circuits. It tones down another pathway that can make our brains overreact to stress signals. And this helps to steady mood swings and calm racing and anxious thoughts. Number 3, it protects brain cells from calcium overload. You might not know this, but too much calcium entering a neuron in the brain can make it burn out, something that we see in Alzheimer's disease and other degenerative diseases. Lithium helps to keep calcium levels in check, protecting neurons from this type of wear and tear. Number 4, lithium balances key neurotransmitters. Lithium boosts serotonin. This is the neurochemical that lifts mood, and also keeps glutamate, the main excitatory signal in our brains, from getting too elevated. So together, these effects create a calmer, more stable brain chemistry. Number 5, it improves learning and memory signals. It strengthens nitric oxide signaling, which helps brain cells form new connections. And this is the process behind learning and long-term memory. Lithium actually helps to tune our body's internal timekeeper, the circadian rhythm that controls our sleep, energy, and mood. As I mentioned, it slows down an enzyme called GSK3 beta, which is part of the feedback loop that turns on our clock genes, lack of better words, on and off each day. And by doing that, lithium helps synchronize our brain's internal timing system, bringing it back into balance and helping support things like sleep, alertness, and hormonal balance. And the result of this is that it can help to improve mood regulation. It may help people who struggle with disrupted cycles, such as in bipolar disorder, depression, seasonal affective disorder, and even jet lag. In short, lithium helps the brain remember what time it is. But lithium does more than stabilize mood. It actually helps the brain grow and stay young. At healthy levels, lithium stimulates the growth of new brain cells and new brain connections, especially in areas that control mood and emotion, like the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. Lithium also appears to protect against diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's by blocking the buildup of toxic proteins such as amyloid and tau, and by keeping mitochondria, the cell's energy engines, running efficiently. Even at very low doses, lithium has been shown to slow brain aging by preserving telomeres, these are the protective caps on the ends of DNA, and reducing chronic inflammation. In short, lithium supports a more resilient, longer living brain. With respect to Alzheimer's disease in particular, when researchers compared brain samples from people with and without Alzheimer's disease, they found something really interesting. Lithium was the only metal that consistently dropped as the disease progressed. So people with Alzheimer's, and even those in the early mild impairment stage, have significantly lower levels of lithium in the brain, while other metals like iron, zinc, and copper, they show no pattern or connection at all. And it turns out that the toxic amyloid beta protein that builds up in Alzheimer's disease actually binds to lithium, locking it away so the neurons that need it can't access it. And that means that the brain can be functionally lithium deficient even if total lithium levels seem to look normal. And what's fascinating is that lithium orotate, which is a very different form of the mineral, it's not the carbonate form, it seems to avoid this problem. Because of how it disassociates in the body, it stays bioavailable inside the brain, helping to protect neurons, mitochondria, and nerve synapses. In animal studies, giving low-dose lithium orotate not only restored memory, but reversed amyloid and tau buildup. And it suggests that it could one day play a role in preventing or even treating Alzheimer's. Let's look at this from a clinical perspective. When I'm using lithium orotate for mood, anxiety, and neurodegeneration, I start somewhere between 1 to 10 milligrams of lithium orotate on a daily basis. I make sure to monitor the thyroid and renal function with long-term usage, since lithium does affect the endocrine system and also electrolyte regulation, although the concern here is much less than with lithium carbonate because we're using a fraction of the dosage that is used in psychiatric medicine. But it is important to make sure that you do not combine it with high-dose lithium carbonate or diuretics, which can alter lithium kinetics in the body. Now, that said, if I am weaning someone off of lithium carbonate, it might be wise or important to use lithium orotate in that process, but that is a carefully supervised process. Lithium in particular combines very well with B vitamins, especially B12 and folate for methylation, with magnesium, which is synergistic with lithium's ability to modulate something called NMDA. Also, it's really helpful given with antioxidants like vitamin E, N-acetylcysteine, and those omega-3 fatty acids, all of which help support neuronal resistance. It appears that low-dose lithium may also facilitate the intracellular transport of vitamin B12, and this potentially supports methylation pathways in individuals with the MTHFR polymorphism. And while this is very preliminary, this mechanism could explain anecdotal reports and clinical experiences that suggest rapid mood improvement and energy improvement that is seen with this microdose usage of lithium orotate. So, in conclusion, lithium, far from being irrelevant, is now being viewed as an essential trace nutrient, comparable in importance to other important nutrients such as iron or vitamin C, and that a deficiency of lithium could predispose someone to dementia and accelerate the process of neurodegenerative decline. So, lithium orotate represents a promising preventative neuroprotective candidate, warranting future human clinical trials to confirm its safety and efficacy. It bridges psychiatry and nutrition. It challenges the traditional dichotomy between what is a toxic drug and what is an essential nutrient. And it's the study that I referred to at the outset of my discussion, the Harvard study published in the journal Nature, that reframes lithium as a naturally occurring neuroprotective nutrient that has broad implications for mood regulation, cognitive resilience, and healthy aging. So in small physiologic doses, the usage of something like lithium orotate seems to herald a future of nutrient-based psychiatry and integrative approaches to neurodegenerative prevention. Up next is my interview with Kat Maier, herbalist, author, and teacher whose work bridges traditional healing and modern medicine. Kat served as president of the board of United Plant Savers and received their first Medicinal Plant Conservation Award. A former Peace Corps volunteer in Chile and a trained physician's assistant, Kat brings together the precision of biomedicine with the insight of traditional energetic systems. She is a founding member of the Botanica Mobile Clinic, offering free herbal support to those facing mental health and community hardship. Kat is also co-author of Bush Medicine of San Salvador Island, Bahamas, and the author of Energetic Herbalism, a guide to sacred plant traditions integrating elements of Vitalism, Ayurveda, and Chinese medicine, which won the 2022 Gold Medal Nautilus Award. My interview with Kat. Kat, welcome so much to The Whole Itself Remains. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off by asking you a question I've been asking my interview guests, and it's just kind of an impromptu answer. I'm very curious on what your working definition is of holism. Like, what does it mean to you?
Let's just start off with something simple. Holism. So, one of the things that's interesting, I love this question because you know how we're separating body, mind, and spirit, and we're saying, oh, it's the whole. And I think sometimes that response is even antithetical to the essence of holism
Mm,
because you're still separating. You're
yeah.
still really separating the body and the mind and the spiritual. And so for me, as we were just saying a little bit before, holism is following that template of nature.
Mm,
And it's really that inability to differentiate the edges in a way. And I know that's not an elevator pitch essence of holism, but it's that mimicking of nature. It's that really encompassing all the aspects of a person. A holistic landscape is all the aspects of that topography. Whatever we're applying holism to, I think it's the nature of that. And then really kind of sussing out, well, what are all the different parts of that? So I think we're even coming into that separatist when we parse out the parts of that. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I admit the insufficiencies of the question, even just talking about the subject itself creates a bunch of questions because now in order to have a conversation, we have to be somewhat reductionist, right? Otherwise, if it's just
Absolutely.
you and me staring at each other for an hour, I mean, that might be entertaining for some, but probably,
Right.
you have
No,
to,
but then for that conversation to happen, and thank you, that's why you're the podcaster, we do need to parse it out so that we
mm,
can have that, well, what does that mean? And how do we weave in the physical with the emotional and the spiritual? Because we learn in the reductionist framework
yeah,
in a lot of ways, and it's a way we communicate, as versus if I were to paint what holism looks like or
yeah,
pull out an instrument.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because I think there's a very much the art as well as the science when we talk about something like herbal medicine. But you just imagine like, yeah, I'm gonna paint you your diagnosis, and here you go, And we
Right.
obviously we do need to be reductionist and give people some
Absolutely.
practical tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I always describe myself as a recovering scientist. So of all people, I can totally get behind a conversation, of separating things to really delineate them because I just think it really, just imparts a really important language for people to
Yeah.
understand.
I'm hoping you'll share a little bit about your background and how you got into this. But one thing that's interesting to me is to find out why people are drawn to this understanding or idea of holism. I mean, we live inherently in this Western society in a reductionist culture. That's what we tend to value. And so while none of us, are come from like a completely sort of conditioned state as children, pretty quickly we assume all the conditioning of society around us, and we're kind of pigeonholed in certain ways of interacting and thinking.
Right.
Was there something that drew you towards holism? Like, there's some type of event or experience that you had where it was like, I'm yearning for some deeper, more holistic understanding of life or disease,
Mm.
medicine.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's been either a maturation or an evolution. You can use either one of those words. And I think as a culture, we have been evolving into desiring a deeper framework from which to
Mm,
work with. So I think culturally, this has also been a response to seeing how reductionism is not working in a lot of people's lives. And they too are searching for more. For me personally, I have to go back to when I was 6 and my archetype of healer was Jesus because I was raised as a Catholic.
mm,
And what was interesting to me is, my mother said, "Oh, well, do you want to be a nun? Do you want to go into the religious order?" And I said, and I said, no, that obviously isn't my path. But what I realized it was the sacred. And what
mm,
I was really searching for, and for me, I really feel, Todd, the sacred is that embodiment of holism. And so
mm,
it was so beautiful as I was pursuing, where do I find that? I saw a movie on the Peace Corps when I was 12, And it was the
Wow.
first time when I was in the Peace Corps. And when I saw the movie, I thought, oh, that's the closest that it feels. It was more of a feeling. And it was the first time that I ever saw anyone harvest herbs.
Oh,
And it was in Chile. I was in the Peace Corps in Chile, and it was such an honor because first of I won't they either thought I was a Mormon or as an American I was with the CIA. I was in Chile in 78. So they kind of didn't know what to make of me living in the country. But it was the first time I saw anyone harvest herbs, and how they did it was they were singing songs, and I knew the language. It was more for themselves to be together. They were enjoying it. And that was the first seed that was planted in me of holism. It was community, it was medicine, they were teaching me how to read the different soil of where to harvest. So it took a while when I came back to the United States to kind of figure out where's that teaching, where's that learning. But that was really the first place that, that was presented to me. And then, it took quite a while because I never even went to herb school, because I wanted to work with certain populations, not indigenous, low income, urban, and I just didn't see. I saw allopathy as a way to work with that population. So it's been quite a circuitous route. And so I studied allopathy as a physician's assistant, and that was quite reductionist. That
mm,
was the ultimate. And yet there was such a stunning art to that,
mm,
and in the way that how they looked at the world in that lens. But I have to say, it took 7 years after school of unlearning some of the rules that are set up, just
mm,
black and white, the rules of allopathy. And it took quite a while to unlearn those, to then bring holism into that deep, deep training of the body. So it's been not a straight path, to be certain, but I don't know if that answers your question, but it was really in the field when I was 18, in Chile, observing and feeling and watching, how they were working with their medicines.
that's cool. Have you struggled with implementing your holistic vision or holistic understanding in everyday practice? I mean, we give a lot of lip service to holism or what is holistic, and yet we do live in this Western reductionist world. I mean, you had this great experience working as a physician's assistant, so you're having to really, mix and match these different paradigms. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering if there are any particular issues that you've encountered or challenges in articulating this holistic vision within this sort of
Right.
Western reductionist framework.
Right. No. So I haven't worked as an allopath for about 20 years. I've been in practice for about 40. So I've really come to energetics as my framework for holism. The
Mm,
energetics of taste, of smell, of landscape, a hot, cold, damp, dry. For me, that's that language. And so I've done it for so long and I'm so comfortable. It's like my first language now. So it's not really a struggle, only because I've been at it for quite a while. And I guess it's that fluency and
mm,
then the stories I've been able to convey. Obviously, when we're in an intake, it's that person's story, it's their time. I'm not bringing in other examples, but it's that confidence as healers. The more we kind of inhabit that world and we come from that world, and it's that credibility of that world, then there's a greater facility with it. But if you would have asked me that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I might be trying to defend the holistic view with a clinical study or the action of bile or enzymes, or I wouldn't have had that confidence. I would have wanted to back that up, with science. And now it's just so eloquent. It's just an elegant language. So I don't feel that challenge now. Even when I'm teaching med students, I stopped teaching med students for a while because I thought I do not need this abuse. And they were fourth year, so it was that fourth year when, boy, they put that white coat on. But now, I had a teacher, Todd, that said, our role is to reveal and not convince. And if they would have given me sentence, that teaching a while ago, I'd have been so much more relaxed. And I don't think I would have had that struggle trying to language the holistic paradigm into the reductionist, because it's just, it's our stories, it's what we know, it's what we watch in the clinic. And it's all right if there isn't that credibility in that other person's world. We know what we see, we know how we harvest and what these medicines are doing and the effect that they have. So, I think because of my age and how long I've been at it. And then the other part is it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter if, I'm so sorry about that. If, just allowing people to be where they are, and I think that is also part of holism.
Mm-hmm.
Holism is allowing those disagreements, because that friction, those questions or that friction place is what really softens us and primes us, and it tests us. It's that metal, how deep are we? And sometimes I say to people, it's not the answer, it's the question.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have the reductionist questions, that, sends me deeper into myself to say, either I don't know, or how would I place that in my holistic viewpoint?
Yeah, and that's an interesting frame of reference because that also resonates with my understanding of holism, that it's not understandable in an intellectual way. And so it really comes out through just experience. And that also speaks to what you were saying about how you've been able to integrate this, not through force of will, but simply by having enough time to be present with maybe what
Mm,
are apparent contradictions. Something that we seem to struggle with so much now in today's society is the simultaneous manifestation of two opposing truths, and then being forced to choose this false dichotomy instead of understanding that they can both be simultaneously true and also untrue, and that there's some pain in holding that.
yes, yes. And also a blessing
Mm,
where, I just got Lyme, and thank goodness for doxycycline,
mm,
and thank goodness for all the plants and, all the places that I could go in my body that doxycycline can't go. And so that whole, it's an and also. And I think as we're looking at culturally, obviously during this time, this is the medicine that these times are really calling for, that we really inhabit that and also. And for me,
mhm,
that's holism. A holistic medicine. So many people come to me and, they've been to their past life regressionist or their astrologer. And I'm like, boy, I think we need a biopsy. I think
mm,
we need some blood work. And I don't do that as an herbalist, but it's an and also, where these worlds I really feel are meant to coexist. And,
mhm,
the miracles of both, and the wisdom to see, where do we need, what is my referral network? What is true holism?
mhm,
That whole, even this Zoom and cyber and the internet and all of this is part of nature. And so I think with natural healing, sometimes we're like, oh, we can go up to here, but when it comes to drugs or surgery, that's a failure. And to really embrace all these different modalities, and not deny somebody that profound holistic journey. And it may look very, very different, mine versus theirs.
Yeah, I think that's really important to have that awareness. We probably just innately tend to value things which are natural as being superior, at least in this field, and think of humans as being separate. And certainly humans have created all kinds of issues in this world with environmental degradation and pollution, and so it's easy to see ourselves as separate. But all that plastic, all those petroleum products, all of the different medical interventions that are available, they're part of the greater whole. We can't deny that.
Absolutely. And, this very well-known physician, dear friend of mine, long, long, long time ago, like 40 years, we had this great discussion. And we were talking about medical training. And so he was saying, okay, we're going to bring in integrative medicine at the end of medical training. And I said, no, 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 start with herbalism, because and I know, I'm getting chills right now, and because it's who we are. We know how far these plants and this medicine and this lifestyle can take us. we know how far we can go before most people then would go to either a prescription or a referral or whatever. And I said, if medical students really understood in a very deep reductionist, however you want to present it to them, doesn't have to be spirit medicine, but if we can let the allopathic world know how much we can do with these plants, that alone would save so much of the medical bio waste and the biohazard, so much, like so much of the packaging alone, even just anyway, so we won't go down that realm. So again, the holistic education. And so for me, I'm always trying to encourage people to start with the plants, and really understand their power. And food, your brilliant
Mhm.
book, Food is Medicine. Same thing could be said there. And so, and again, that's our work in looking at education and redefining education, and where do we start with that?
Yeah, and that so much mirrors my perspective too on clinical practice. I'm sure you had this experience that too many times someone that say has a cancer diagnosis has gone through all the different oncological interventions, chemo, radiation, whatever, and then comes to me seeking support. And it's backwards, right? You want to come and see someone like us at the outset of diagnosis, and then start weaving in those other interventions as required, because so I'm not going to deny the importance of these oncological interventions. It's just the orientation and approach, that holistic approach to the patient itself. I think that many people struggle with that in a clinical setting.
Well, absolutely. And I think it's education for the culture. It's
Mm.
not just education for herbalists, but on a much wider scale. And I would never pretend to tell you anything new about Ayurveda, but what do they say? 90% of illnesses can be prevented with, looking at lifestyle, looking at all that these natural medicines bring. And so, we're looking at a time, at least in our country, where access is really, it already is affected, but, looking at this time as this opportunity, when there is a breakdown, it's kind of the disillusion of something. And is this our time now to step in with these other medicines, with these other alternatives, if you will, to bring these to our community? So I know that that's what we're doing in our community right now, kind of mutual aid, um, just preparing for a lot of people who may not have access to some of the prescriptions that are really, really important to them. And there's so much we can do. There is a tremendous amount we can do, and wisely. And so we'll need collaboration, we'll need cooperation. But in some ways, there is an excitement, and possibilities. It's simply about possibilities.
Yeah, especially with the upheaval that you guys in particular are experiencing in the States, that crisis can be an opportunity. In Canada, we have socialized medicine, and so I feel that for many folks here, there's a bit of apathy when it comes to taking care of their own health. Not
Mm,
saying that there isn't a preventative focus, but there's always that backstop of free healthcare. So it's unlike the situation in the States where people just don't have access. Many
right.
people don't have access, or it's just ridiculously expensive. So among my colleagues, and maybe you can share that with me, there's more opportunity sometimes to actually be a primary care practitioner, because you're basically it. I mean, are you going to go see a doctor who's going to prescribe the same PPIs or antibiotics that you've been on
Right.
before? Are you going to go see someone that actually is oriented towards getting to the root of the problem?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what's interesting is, I mean, I've in some ways closed my practice now. I'm traveling and I'm teaching more. And then there's certain people that I will not stop seeing. I'm seeing third generation.
Mm.
My first herbalist, my first training was with a midwife. And so I learned my herbalism through a midwife who worked with Mennonites. And so the Mennonites were incredible teachers because they didn't punt, like they stayed home. There
Right,
was no alternative. And
right.
so this midwife was so brilliant, so courageous, and I just traveled so far in that teaching. And so long, long time ago, I was kind of helping catch babies. And so now it's their grandchildren. And, when I'm working generationally, there's no way I'm not going to keep working with these families. So that's very, very exciting.
Mm.
And we become primary health care because we've been around in the family and in the community for so long. But truth be told, as you know, Todd, in this state, we have a long, long way to go where herbalists are primary
Oh, yeah.
care, you know. But we're making a ton of elderberry syrup out there and fire cider, and that's where we begin with that.
Yeah, I mean that's the lovely thing about Ayurveda that I think the potential advantage there. You also see it in other traditional systems is that there's a spectrum of practice from
Yeah,
grandma medicine, which is the first medicine. Even the physicians in India will say, first you listen to your grandmother, right? And then, then you can come and see us. So just
right,
having that kind of
right,
continuity that you've seen in your practice is
right.
it's such a wonderful
Yeah,
revelatory experience.
yeah, it really is. It's I mean, we use the word honor a lot these days, and that is truly an honor to be working with generations of families, and they're all over in the valley and still make house calls, and it's just it's been such a profound teaching for me,
Yeah,
and that alone really brings back to the world of holism
right.
in that way of their lifestyle and who they are.
Yeah, I
Um,
want to shift gears and ask you about your book, Energetic Herbalism. So first off, I'm a little pissed off that you wrote the book that I wanted to release.
Oh,
I'm joking, but I'm so thankful that there's other people in the
wow.
world, and I know, such as yourself and others like Michael Tira, that are such advocates of integrating this wonderful global knowledge of herbal medicine and then making it available. I mean, it's such a vast storehouse of knowledge that we have access to, and different cultures bring different insights. So I'm kind of curious, how did you arrive at writing that book?
Right. Well, what's interesting is, and this is a great opportunity to dispel the myth. I wasn't integrated, even though I don't, writing a book, I couldn't name it. I couldn't even choose the cover.
Oh
So
yeah.
that is a deep surrender place.
Mm,
And I'm integrating them because I'm writing about the three different traditions, and I'll talk about them in the book, but I'm not integrating the traditions.
mm,
So back in 1988, I was on my way to China because I didn't think you dabble in Chinese medicine. I thought,
mm,
oh, I'm going to go to China, I'm going to learn Chinese medicine. And this piece of land in our rural Shenandoah Valley came up, and it was just really clear that this land was calling me. So it was either put the down payment for my time in China on this land. And so obviously I stayed here and learned local plants. And so I kind of put Chinese medicine aside because I just thought it's too honorable, if you will. And
mm,
so over the years, over 30 years, essentially, I had a teacher in five phase, five element, and then in Ayurveda. And I would sit with them for 2, 3, 4 years, just really studying them on my own. And then eventually, this book is sort of my 3-year curriculum because I
mm,
was getting ready to close the school. I'm 70. And I
mhm,
thought, okay, well, I'll keep teaching and I'll keep doing certain things, but running a school, 3-year program, it's
mm,
time to slow down a little bit. And so essentially, this book is what I taught in the 3 years. And so for me, the five phase, the five element, the greatest medicine, there's so much medicine in these
mhm,
systems, right? But for me, that's the seasons. It's the
mhm,
elements, it's the seasons, it's
mhm,
the languaging of our outer landscape, inner landscape, and how can we connect? I think for climate change, the greatest way to work for climate change is we protect what we love
mm,
and we protect what we understand.
mhm,
And it's almost like protecting the seasons.
mm,
Last winter, 2 winters ago, there wasn't a freeze. I didn't have winter, and I came into spring, and I couldn't believe I was just so impatient. I realized, oh my God, I didn't have a winter, and
mm,
how the seasons really inform our living. So the five phase was to gift people, okay, here are the seasons, how we live seasonally, what are some practices. And because we're not trained as counselors, and I see so many young herbalists kind of being these I don't know, armchair counselors asking questions that they should never ask because they're not trained in that.
Mm,
But for the five phase, understanding the emotions that will go with these elements, it does give us a really interesting tool to look at grief, look at anger, work with these energetics in the body.
mm,
So the Ayurveda, so that was the one system. Ayurveda for me, I was trying to work with Western physiognomy with ectomorph, mesomorph, and it just is so clumsy. It's not developed. And for
mm,
me, Ayurveda constitution, it's brilliant
mm,
and it's understood. It's a universal that is so easily understood. And so I was sort of going from the macro, the season, our environment, coming into the constitution, and then going to vitalism and Western energetics, more as like the Vikruti. You have
mm,
your Prakruti, you have your constitution, and then what are the daily presentations? What are the symptoms?
mm,
The other thing with vitalism and the six tissue states, um, there's not a lot of writing on them, and I totally love the eclectics. In fact, I lived on your website a lot writing the book. You had the best article on the eclectics and physiomedicalism, and yeah, it was just brilliant. And also, we work a lot with unhoused. My school focuses on a certain population, and so when we talk about spleen chi or we use certain vocabulary, that is distancing. That's kind of hierarchical.
mm,
So working with the Western tissue states, it's understood by clients, by community. Oh, that's stagnation. Oh, there's that tension. The
mm,
energetic language, even though it's not as elegant as Ayurveda
mm,
or the TCM five phase, because for just different reasons the Greek humoral has its limits, I feel, but it's our language. And for
mm,
me, I think speaking the language, empowering that client to really understand, oh, deficient, whatever that may be.
mm,
So that's why then I brought forward Vitalism to bring that language. And it's also North American, if you will.
mhm,
I don't have the teaching to write about indigenous. That's not my training. That's not my heritage. I'm European. I'm Celtic. So if I could go to the closest relations of medicine, what did they practice? That would have been Vitalism.
mhm,
So, so I'm keeping them separate as different lenses, if you will, in how to work with the body. And so the word integration gets a little confusing, but it's presenting them as a whole. And I totally understand because there's different, I just came out with it not that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And anytime somebody would come out with a book, I'd be like, I hope they don't write my book. But it's been, kind of 20 years in the making, as it's my curriculum, if you will. But that's a
right.
huge compliment coming from you.
Aw. Well, it's a wonderful book, and I appreciate that you give emphasis to being able to understand those different systems on their own terms. I think maybe for some there's too much enthusiasm towards the sort of syncretic thing where you're mixing
Right.
and matching terms and not honoring those separate
Yeah.
traditions.
No, I kind of had a heart attack when I saw the word integrating
Ah,
because it was like the last thing.
right.
You cannot. It'd be like I don't know. I'm thinking of like a material like a silk kimono integrating with, I don't know. You can't. They're so stunning on their own and they all deserve their place. And I stayed away from writing about them. And then I realized Westerners do not have this language.
No.
We don't look at the seasons. We don't look at Constitution. And then the fellow that came up with Western constitutions, he was totally unethical. And
Right.
so I just didn't want anything to do with Sheldon or that system. And so I gave him, and for me as practitioners, I think that's really a beautiful balance, to really bring that in, to look at the body that way and to really inform someone of their nature. So
Yeah. Yeah, to me, it's sort of similar to, say, if someone's a master chef, I mean, they might be trained in these different culinary traditions, Chinese cuisine, French cuisine,
mm,
South Asian cuisine, And as a master chef, they might be able to mix and match different recipes to kind of create these amazing fusion styles, but that's not a starting point, right? Like you have to really
Absolutely.
understand those traditions separately, and it takes that time, and the integration seems to be a function of just what oozes out of you through your own internal integration, through your own experience.
Right, exactly. And I hope I say this throughout, the caveat over and over, that each of these systems takes a lifetime, if
Yeah.
not more than one lifetime to understand it. But they're like tools. They're tools in someone's medicine bag. Just as we would have pulse and would have tongue, the seasons are a way to look at it, a constitution, a predilection, too much fire, what that would be. And I don't really do that crossover.
Mm.
It might be a reference, but each of them really stands on their own.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think your book is an enormous boon to the field in the sense that for Westerners, we really lack that language of energetics. It's been weaned out of us, for so many years. People would say things like, if you've got a cold and you want to stay warm, and don't go outside with wet hair, and give you all this advice around protecting yourself from cold. But then, the physicians will chime in and say it's not caused by cold; it's a virus, right? And it just totally discounts someone's embodied experience of what a cold is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the energetics helps us to realize, wow, echinacea and golden seal are cold medicines.
Mm,
We've been getting this wrong.
yeah.
We've been kind of allopathic, nutraceutical based.
Mm,
And when we understand we have a cold, why would we take cold medicines? So
yeah.
that alone, and that came to me midway through. I kind of learned David Hoffman, British herbalism, medical herbalism, kind of allopathic herbalism. But what's so interesting is when I go back to, say, David's medical herbalism and I look at his formulas, a good practitioner will have the energetics in place.
Yeah.
It's implied in that formula, which is so beautiful.
Hmm.
It's so beautiful to watch that art form of formulation. And, with your readings, just the extent, the depth of the Ayurvedic tradition. And I, I couldn't even begin to grasp the complexity of that, but the worlds that that holds and the possibilities of, what's all going on with that. And
Hmm.
yeah,
And I feel like anyone who works with plants, regardless of their language, will inevitably come to this understanding of energetics simply because it's a true expression of our
Mm,
sensory interaction with the natural world, right? Because we receive all of this incoming sensory data through seasons, through climatic influences. They might yield some type of intellectual observation, but they're an embodied experience that relates
absolutely.
to quality, to the
Yeah,
energetic
absolutely.
aspect.
Absolutely. And way back when, I practiced with maybe 15 herbs for quite a number of years. I was this radical bioregionalist. I didn't go to herb school. I didn't have herb teachers. I hustled a job. No running water, cabin. We were in the hollers. And I was in the woods. I would make money in the morning and I'd go into the woods, and I knew these 15 plants. I knew them inside and out. And so that's what, I recommend to students, to start really small with your apothecary and taste that herb. Do Scutellaria for a week. Observe in your body, because I think exactly what you're saying is we can feel those energetics. And what I'm seeing, especially today, there's just a plethora on Instagram and internet and so many courses, and they're enrolled in a bunch of courses, but are they making the cup of the single tea? And are
Mm,
they experiencing that? So just kind of returning them back home to, well, what did that feel like? What did that taste like? And in my clinic, what we would do in the second year is it'd be a blind tasting, and they'd all arrive, and I'd have the tea made, and we would take a good solid half hour. We would taste it. For what direction? Where does it go on your tongue? What's the flavor? We sat and sat and sat, and boy, do they learn herbs that way. You can feel elderflower. It's expanding. It's oh, that's a diaphoretic.
Mm,
You experience the outward energy. So I'm a huge fan of that experiential, and doing our best to stay with one herb for a little bit at a time, just to see how are you different at the end
mm,
of that week, and bringing back to the senses. The word ecology, that's our home.
mm,
Ecological medicine is the medicine of our home.
mm,
And for me, holism, back to this beautiful topic that you're exploring, that's we're whole within the whole, within our
mm,
ecology. And
mhm.
so we know gut ecology, and now we're knowing ecology is in our lungs and biodiversity everywhere, but that's our home, and bringing that back. And for me, that's such a beautiful place that these plants are gifting these generations that are really coming into herbalism with greater frequency than at least I did, and
Yeah,
possibly yourself as well.
yeah, absolutely. We have about 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your work providing, like, you mentioned that you providing herbal medicine to underserved populations. You had a mobile clinic, a Botanica mobile clinic, and I'm curious about that, why you did that, and if you think that there's something inherent about this practice, not of just holism, of being a herbalist, that necessitates this type of outreach.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think it necessitates. It just, for me, service is just it's such a really important place in my life. And when I met Lorna Mana Braddock, who has Herbalista, and she is a profound mentor of mine. She's now living in Dublin. But when I watched her work of free care in Atlanta, her Herbus, it was just such a profound turn on for me. And I
Mm,
thought, this is such an incredible model. And she didn't have huge capital behind her. It was generative on her part. So it was very exciting, and there was a lot of students who wanted this work. So I studied a lot with her. She did a lot of foot care in Atlanta. She believes that the unhoused, that their feet are their home. So diabetics and ulcers, and we all know what can happen with the damp and being outside. So she would do up to like minor surgery. She would train these herbalists in Atlanta at the Harriet Tubman Clinic. Just miracles that she would work. Super
mm,
humble woman. So, so she was a teacher of mine, and we started a clinic here in a mental health, because I think mental health is abysmal in the United States. I've had many, many friends. I've been in many, many psych wards, and this was a fabulous program here called On Your Own. And it would be when people would get out of hospital, they were literally on their own. So we were there, and we set up a clinic. And then we had Unite the Right here in Charlottesville in 2017. We set up clinic, we set up grief care, we set up, a lot of different stations. So we're sort of crisis defined. We did a tremendous amount with Hurricane Helene. I went
mm,
down there a couple of times, really supporting that medicine. At the LA fires, and we have medicines to send out there and making contacts. So I love that clinic. I love bringing students into the real world
mm,
of, here we are, here's the polypharmacy. What do
mm,
you do when people are on all these psych meds?
mm.
There is Rose. There is Rose. And, so really also grateful for that opportunity to bring students into that interface of what's happening. And then the last thing I'll say is Lorna, this other herbalist, Christina Gibson, and myself, we've been working on a project since Helene, really, called the Herbal Mutual Aid Directory. And our goal is to create a map of the States and Canada where who are we, where are the free clinics, who is a distribution center. Um, you know, I've believed in this forever, even before elections of this year, last year, 20 years ago. It's
Mm,
mutual aid. And so, but this is a really important project now, because I think we need to know who's out there, where can we get the medicines, and then how do we support local growing? So that's a project that's ongoing, and to service. I mean, watching what happened in Asheville was, I mean, this is the year anniversary, and boy, did collectives form, and it's so integral to the weaving of that community. So Yeah, so that's Botanica Mobile Clinic, and we don't have a physical clinic. It's right now sort of just me, and then I'll put a newsletter out, and people will come and help make medicine. And it waxes and wanes. You know how those projects are, but
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful part of my our whole life in this community.
And it's a wonderful affirmation that herbal medicine has this potential to serve not just people with chronic disease, but suffering from acute illness. I'm imagining that's what you're doing. You're seeing a lot of people in essentially an emergency condition and then trying to
Absolutely.
match them up with different remedies. So having that type of, emergency care first line experience, that's an amazing thing.
Well, absolutely, and it really belies the power of the plants, but which ones? And I just have a very brief story. I had the honor of going to Standing Rock, and I kind of got for me, it was a spiritual invitation because it was their movement and it wasn't mine. And so I got there in December, and the blizzards were coming, and we even had to evacuate to the casino, and there were no tinctures. We couldn't use alcohol at the
Right.
request of the native. So who stayed, Todd, in the camps? They were elders. Like the elders were the ones in their teepees, in their lodges with the wood stoves. So when we moved them, they were diabetic. They had, lung. And, I was, because of my PA, I was part of the triage with the allopathy and over to the herbalist. And what I saw fire cider vinegar do was absolutely mind blowing because it was immediate. Their cold, damp stagnation was immediately moved and opened to get to the places to kind of open up those pathways to get the other herbs in there. And I've never been the same since. And I know everybody's fire cider vinegar, but that was one place where I saw this is a powerful, powerful medicine. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think probably many people listening to this will know what fire cider is, but maybe you could just briefly share with me, your
Sure.
experience with it, and then maybe
Sure.
like a simple recipe that you like to use.
Sure, absolutely. Rosemary Glass started teaching it 40 years ago. It's a traditional remedy, and it's apple cider vinegar. And you steep garlic and onions and cayenne and horseradish and all kinds of warming herbs. And then, of course, because there were so many medicines sent to Standing Rock, and because they couldn't send tinctures, we got every variation of fire cider from pomegranate flower to hibiscus. So we had a whole range of cool fire cider to the habanero to the hot. So fire cider is essentially you're making a vinegar extract. You're making a vinegar tincture, and you're steeping very, very warming herbs. You can put hawthorn, you can put in whatever medicines. Lots of bioflavonoids will give over in that vinegar as solvent. And then you can steep it 2 weeks. Some people steep it up to a month, decant it, pour off the food, compost that, and then you just drink that through the winter. We would add it to water. You can cook with it, salad vinegar, but it is potent because it's that raw garlic. You put the onions in with the skins because of all the quercetin. You can make, where do you get those onion skins? Fire cider vinegar. You can make a whole vinegar of just those skins. That's fire cider vinegar. Really affordable and very accessible. And they would come back. We would see these elders coming back for another shot because it was so potent. And you could see the chi, you could see the vitality,
Mhm.
returning. And so that was a wonderful lesson in a great acute medicine because the thing with Hurricane Helene was the mold. And
Right.
it was I mean, just travesty of water. Like, and there's still people that are still unhoused. But now we have to look at the mold. Now you have to look at a year, 2 year, 3 year, and how do you change that topography of the ecosystem that we're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It can get complex, but having something like that at your fingertips, that of course is acceptable to
Right,
people of indigenous heritage, that where there may be
right,
some hesitation around alcohol. Apple cider vinegar is cheap. It's available to everybody. It's a great way to preserve the herbs and
right.
all those benefits that you mentioned. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, not to say mold is simple with apple cider vinegar. Thank
Yeah,
you for saying it's very complex.
yeah,
But thanks for asking about Botanica. It's a near and dear project.
that's wonderful. Kat, I have to wind things up. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. Your experience and your work is just so vital to this field of herbal medicine. So I honor
Thank
you for your
you.
contributions.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for this invitation. I really am. I've just been learning from you for almost all those years that I've been training. So to be here is, I'm deeply grateful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Todd.
Thank you, Kat.